I can try it.
It's that moment like when you're talking and then all of a sudden the room goes quiet.
I haven't gotten an answer from my last text.
Yours does.
All right, I'd like to welcome everybody out to our Herman City Council work meeting for August 14th, 2019. We'll go ahead and get started with item 2.1. Any items on tonight's agenda that we need to discuss or make changes to?
We will continue, we need to continue 3.9 on the work meeting.
3.9. Anything else that we need to discuss for tonight? All right, any future agenda items that we'd like to have added to a future meeting?
Oh, well, maybe you might see it about dates. We have plenty to talk about that date. And we talked about SEAM updates. So.
Okay.
It's not agenda items, just meetings coming up.
Okay.
Yeah, as we get into the work meeting discussion items, there may be an item for me to give some thoughts on, but we'll wait till we get there.
Okay,
See how I'm feeling.
all right, with that, we'll move on to item 3.1, disc golf course proposal. Our Parks Director, Wendy Thomas.
Hello. How's everyone?
Good, thank you.
Thank you for your time tonight. As you know, we have a history with the disc golf course. Are you able to pull that up, Destiny? It was originally installed at Rosecrest Park along that trail system. It was never intended to be there, but was an added amenity. It did cause a lot of issues with the surrounding neighborhoods, the surrounding homes. And so we were directed to remove the disc golf course from that area in 2018 and seek out some other sites. In the spring, I was approached via email by Enoch. This is Enoch Hopkinson, here Enoch. And he had some solutions for the disc golf course. And I thought it was really incredible that we had this fine resident that was bringing us solutions instead of just asking what we were going to do about it. So he's here tonight to present his ideas. We've met a couple times. We met at the proposed site. And he's really done a great job in doing research. And so I'm going to turn the time over to him. He can finish.
Awesome.
Mayor Watts, City Council member. My name is Enoch Hopkinson. I'm 12 years old, and I'm proposing to build a disc golf course behind the Blackridge Reservoir. And I've been working with the Parks and GIS department, and tonight I am hoping for your approval. I love to play disc golf, and I loved your old course, and I know that lots of other people loved your old course too. I know that you get called about it. When you told me that you're getting called about it like 3 or 4 times a week. And I recently played a course in Highland or Beacon Hills, and it's really popular, and I liked it a lot. And I realized that it was an Eagle Scout project, which gave me the idea to make a new disc golf course in here for here.
They're trying to pull up your slides. Just 1 minute.
Technical difficulties. You'll have that from time to time.
I'm proposing to build you a new Harriman disc golf course behind Blackridge Reservoir up on the mountain where the Diamondback Trail is. The benefits of this location.
You want to go back? Look at the other slide.
No, that's okay. That's good. The benefits of this location is that there's no private property issues, which was the problem with the old course. There is already established parking at the Blackridge Reservoir, and there are trails, and you already own baskets, which makes things simpler and easier and cheaper. And we're trying to go for low impact, so we won't use cement. We'll bolt the basket straight into rock with like a hammer drill or something, and it follows the existing trail. And our installation plan we'll probably do 9 holes this fall, and I have some other Eagle Scouts on board, maybe to make tee boxes or something. Thank you, Ms. Honest, and for being willing and helpful, and getting me to other people that I could talk to, and Eric and Anthony were a big help, and Bill Reading, who helped with the map design, which was very useful and helped me figure out where all the holes could be. And all these people really added a good experience and ideas, and thank you so much for having me tonight.
Answer
Well
some
done.
questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. You all have any questions for either of us?
So
Sure.
where is the closest property?
You can see someone's swimming pool right there on the corner of, I'm not sure which line that is, I can't see, my eyes are getting old. One. That would be the closest property, right there. Black Ridge Reservoir is essentially down here. So as you can see, there's really not anything too close, I mean, not like we had at Rosecrest.
Is the trail heavily used by mountain bikers? Is that gonna be a conflict with mountain bikers and the disc golf? Do you see that playing well together or no?
So if you look kind of on here, we're never throwing across the trail, so we're never gonna be throwing at people or anything like that.
Okay.
And so I don't think that would be a huge problem. And
So that they can kind of coexist together pretty well, you think? An occasional, here and there, but yeah, good.
He hasn't seen me throw, so.
Are you in 7th grade?
yeah.
So in 2 years, you can be on the youth council because you'll definitely be there.
Recruiting all of our
Yeah, it's just getting early.
So I see your proposed, course layout here. In terms of, I guess, what was in place previously and the distance on the holes here, how does that compare to the previous course to this one? Is it, I guess for those who are avid at playing the sport, is it going to give the challenge that they desire? And the second question I have to that is, we can see some of the contour lines on there, but is there going to have to be any other, I guess, landscaping changes made in order to accommodate the course in this particular area?
Okay, so your first question was
Just the distance on each hole compared to what used to be in place.
Oh, so yeah, there's kind of like two different kinds of courses, like the parks kind of course, like your old one where you're throwing in a park, and like a mountain terrain one. So like there's a course in Solitude that's on a mountain, and I played that one, and it's really, really fun. And the distance are like, we worked with people in the disc golf community, and like I think that they're a pretty good distance, and we can get the pars just right and stuff like that. And
Probably on average a little further than the course that was there. I'd say the averages are, so there's some longer holes than.
Longer.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a good mix.
But again, it sounds like this one is more kind of designed on more of a mountain type premise than the park premise that was used particularly, or before.
Right.
And that's interesting. Okay. And what about changes to the hillside or topography in order to accommodate it?
so, like I said, we're gonna be moving on to rock, so there won't be need to like bring cement up there, which would be a big hassle. But we're gonna make tee boxes that are like, we're just gonna dig them from the ground, make them level, and like use a railroad tie or something. And I think that's gonna be one of just the main things is tee boxes.
Okay.
Yeah, and flatter areas that we'll find for the reference spot.
Any other questions for either of us? Oh, just great job of just taking the initiative to do all this work. That's very impressive.
So what we would like from you is whether you want us to continue to explore this through neighborhood meetings and going through the process and getting some cost estimates as to what this is gonna be. This is park construction eligible, so it wouldn't be a capital project outlay, so that's a good thing. So if we have that direction, we'll keep moving forward.
Yes.
I would just make one request too, is that in through these meetings, and I don't know, but it would be, I think, in good spirit on our part to reach out to even the mountain biking teams that utilize this and maybe have a representative from them to give input at the meetings just so that everyone's on the same page. I'm not saying that these are only for mountain bikers by any means, but just so that those communities are in the loop and understand what's gonna be going on, so they can be more cautious or things like that as they go through those trails.
And my only concern is the proximity to that one property. It looks like we do have one that's kind of pointing that way, and someone.
I think it throws away from it. Is that right?
First one
whole
does, I
one.
think the last one comes back
But
towards it.
If we need to.
So, so just making sure that those homeowners are aware and are part of the conversation. Other than that, I think it's fantastic.
The other thing that we discussed was just doing a 9-hole course for now and seeing how things go. And then if things go well, we can look at expanding it and making it a bigger area play, so.
Awesome.
I think it's a great idea, and I appreciate anytime anybody brings a solution as opposed to just asking us why there's a problem.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Wendy, I would just ask from the, Parks Director perspective, give us your take on this proposal up in that area again, to Sherry's point of coexisting with some of the other activities that we're promoting in the area. Do you see challenges with that?
There's always gonna be challenges with it. I think there's going to be added pressure to Black Ridge, which makes me a little nervous, especially when we don't have an algae bloom and we've got all the traffic that we have there. That concerns me just a little bit.
I know how to fix that.
I do too. The other thing that concerns me, there's a lot of rattlesnakes in this area. So that's a little bit concerning to me.
Just
but
an
it's
added
always-
challenge on the
That's
course.
right. It's gonna be extreme disc golf. rattlesnakes. The other thing that GIS brought up to me was a concern about fire danger. And the only reason we think that is not to say that disc golf is passive. I don't wanna upset the disc golf people, but if you go to a golf course, you'll see cigarette butts on a golf course. And we had cigarette butts at Rosecrest. And so we do have some fire concerns, in this area with those types of activities. I don't think that those challenges are big enough to just say no and kill the project. But I think it's something we need to be aware of and help mitigate where we can, so.
Great.
Well, I appreciate your efforts to, again, find a solution, especially something that you have a passion about, and for having the courage to come stand before this group to be able to present it. That can be pretty intimidating, but well done, and I definitely support at least exploring it further.
We'll take the next steps.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to our next item, item 3.2. It'll be a Utah Transit Authority Board report from Carlton Christensen.
You want me standing down there, or? Okay. I'll stand wherever you
We're
want.
gonna be able to see you wherever you stand.
You're down here with your chief family brother.
Okay, let me do that, sorry.
Go stand by.
Wait, which one, do that? Is there an easy way to advance, or do I just tell you?
We got a clicker?
While he's grabbing that clicker, let me just tell you, I put at each of your tables, or each of your places, a map of the service that UTA currently offers. Thank you. Within Harriman, the flip side shows the average ridership for each of those routes, and obviously it's something we consider as we look at service and more importantly how we improve service. And so if you see something that's low, doesn't mean that we wouldn't ever add or modify service. In fact, if it's low, it's probably reason to figure out how we can do it better. And it's just really more for a frame of reference. I just wanted to, first of all, we always begin our any presentation at UTA with a little safety plug, and one of which is that I'm working on personally is that of distraction and distracted drivers. Sometimes I've just left my cell phone in the back seat and figured calls can wait, or take away any temptation to glance at it. Certainly being cognizant of each day, and sadly 9 people are killed each day from accidents surrounding distraction. And so we find it a constant challenge, particularly in our rail segment, because we have people that hop off trains or tracks not paying attention, earbuds in their ears, and despite operators or engineers blasting their horn can't get their attention. And in some cases, you can't even with diligent effort stop the train in time, and we've had some unfortunate deaths. So avoid distraction and as you go forward. I show this picture just a little bit from orientation. A couple legislative sessions ago in Senate Bill 136, the legislature changed the governance structure of the Utah Transit Authority. We began officially on November 1st, and it went through an appointment process. There are three positions. My colleague Beth Holbrook represents the northern counties, Davis, Weber, and Box Elder, and my colleague Kent Millington represents Utah and Tooele counties, and I represent Salt Lake County. In my case, I went through a nominating process from Mayor McAdams to our county council and then on to the governor. The governor subsequently selects the chair, and so he's asked me to serve in that dual role. I show this also in that when we began, we were looking nationally for something to follow or to use just as a basis to get started. And what we've come to discover is that there's no transit agencies, certainly no large transit agencies in America, that has this governance model, which either tells you it's a bad idea or it's really innovative. So we'll see how this turns out, and we're working to make it an innovative model. And we've been to a couple national conferences, and we've had a lot of the large transit agencies taking a look at it, so we'll hope it's on that end. The legislature also created an advisory council to opine on some very important pieces, factors in our service, in our budgets, in our service planning, in our capital planning, and they meet at least quarterly, and really they meet about 5 to 6 times a year. Council member Smith is serving, and his responsibility, for example, is as well beyond Harriman. They're recommended or appointed by COG, and so it has to take on a broader role in looking at that service area, and certainly as a system as a whole. And they too are a new aspect. We recently had our federal monitoring report, and they were questioning the role of the advisory council and things, and to their defense, that assessment was done in January, and in January we were both figuring things out, and we've made some good progress since then. We appoint the executive director. Historically, the Transit Authority has had a president CEO that has had very outward facing, but also had the responsibilities for the inward operations of the agency. The legislation changed that position to an executive director, and we got, to be honest, we got conflicting guidance from different legislative leaders. Some wanted us to operate it like a county commission, where we each had particular segments, and others, couldn't really tell us what the role of the executive director was. But what we realized is we asked historical questions that historically, the president and CEO either had a little bit of a challenge making sure the organization was running correctly, or they had a challenge communicating with stakeholders. And we realized our role is communicating as stakeholders, and as well as setting policy and budget and other decisions, and that we needed an executive director who was heavily focused on the internal operations of the organization and working to improve that. And so that model has been working well. We have a new executive director who will start on Monday. First female, first outside director for the organization, Carolyn Gannott, who's coming to us from VTA, which is in the San Jose, Santa Clara area of County, California, and comes with 22 years in the transit industry, and we're looking forward to having her with us. I wanted to take a couple minutes and talk about, in January, in July 1st, both you and us started receiving our respective shares of the fourth quarter transportation tax. If you remember, that's a 0.25 of 1%, and local municipalities got 40% of that, UTA got 40% of that, and then the counties got 20% of that for projects of regional significance. And so as we don't actually, unless you've gotten yours earlier than us, we don't expect to actually see those dollars start rolling in till probably September or maybe even October. And so really this is talking about next year for all intents and purposes, but we will get some funds this year, and we're on a calendar year. So we wanted to talk about a little bit how we're planning to use that and our approach in how that would take place. We want to break it up into two different segments. One I'll call a mobilization phase, which is 2019 and 2020, and then implementation, which I'll talk about here in a little bit, in 2021. And the reason, and you may look at August and said, what's magical about August? Well, in our service, we have 3 change days, December, April, and then August. But most of our changes, and we just had one this week, is in August, and any significant changes we try to reserve to that month, so it minimizes the impact on riders. But we start and stop our ski service in December and then ended it roughly in April. And so that's why we're calling August of 21. We're completing a service choice study, and I'll speak to that here in a second. And Clint mentioned it to me, and I'd love to chat about that a little bit, and certainly would take any feedback that you have. But it takes a while to plan routes. The fire service may appreciate this. When they order a new fire engine, you pay all this money and then you get to wait a year. Buses are the same deal. I somehow need to get into this business where you pay $500,000 to $750,000 for a vehicle and you get to wait a year. You get to get in line, actually. And so we recently added some service in Salt Lake City, of which they paid for, but it required 10 buses, and so get 10 buses in a year, and it's more than an operator per bus, because you run the bus a lot longer than a shift, and so just hiring personnel, figuring out places to park the bus and service the bus, and then the respective support takes a couple years to build up. Currently, the 2 bus facilities we have in Salt Lake County are at their maximum. Fortunately, we were in the process of rebuilding the one in downtown Salt Lake and expanding it, allowing us to service CNG vehicles better. Our current facility doesn't do that very well. And also, we just took delivery of our first 3 electric buses, and in fact, they went into operation on Monday. But the facilities to service those are limited, and so to add or expand our electric bus fleet will require additional facilities. And so that, if you come by our offices, we're in the process of demoing what was the old Lineco factory behind our headquarters, and we'll add a new facility there. And then we also have to do some capital planning with, having turnaround places for operators and we're at end of line to give them a break, and we don't have those as spread out through the valley as we really need to have that take place. So this is, in this mobilization phase, this is the ratio of how we anticipate using those funds. There will be some bus improvements. We just adopted a bus stop master plan, and interestingly enough, we have about 6,400 bus stops in our system. Most of them do not meet the American with Disabilities Act requirements. But we know which stops have ramp deployments, and we find when we make those improvements, we actually not only have increased ridership from those with disabilities, but our requests for paratransit go down. People want to be independent. They want to be able to access the system where they do. So we want to put some money into bus stop improvements. we're grandfathered, but once we make a change to a bus stop, not too unlike when you remodel a building, we have to bring it up to that standard. Again, a lot will go into capital. Most of the light rail vehicles we have, not most, all the light rail vehicle systems we have are in Salt Lake County. This year we celebrate the 20th anniversary of opening what's now known as the Blue Line. I spoke as a young council member at the opening of the what was then the North-South Line, and those vehicles, if you've been on them lately, are a little bit tired. They're 40-year vehicles, but they have to have a major overhaul, and we did some calculations after getting some bids back, and it's actually less expensive for us and more ideal for us to do the renovations on the cars themselves. We don't have to pull them out for the whole duration. We can pull them out, do part of the service, put them back into service, and allows us to do that more systematically, and we learn from those. And so we want to put about 1/4 of these funds toward the updating and eventually the replacement in 20 years of those vehicles. And then once we get to August of so in those 2 years, we'll also evaluate bus service. The bulk of these funds are going to go toward bus expansion and bus service and improvements. And about 3/4, not quite 3/4, we anticipate going into additional bus service throughout Salt Lake County and related areas. And we want to think through how to do that most effectively, which leads to a question about how you might do that. One of the ways which we could potentially do that, we've gone through a procurement process and are in the process of finalizing our contract with a private provider called VIA. VIA does this work internationally. They have a great integration with apps, and it's a little bit of akin to a ride-hailing service, but they offer paratransit. Any time we offer service within a 3/4 of a mile, that service, we're required to offer paratransit service to those who aren't able to get on our system and to help them get to where they want to go. That's a very expensive ride. That's about $25 per person per ride, where if you get on one of our systems, it's about a $4 cost to do that. But they have the ability, and some of their vans would have paratransit capabilities. But how that would work is you'd go on an app, you'd indicate where your destination is, and our initial test pilot is a 65 square mile geofence service area, which includes the cities of Bluffdale, Draper, Harriman, and Riverton. It also reaches into South Jordan by quite a bit and into Sandy a little bit. But their area is currently served by, as you see on these maps, some flex routes with fairly low ridership. To be honest, that ridership doesn't actually justify the type of service that's currently being offered. But what that does is it allows you to go anywhere within that geofenced area. So if you worked, for example, in Draper, you could get on the microtransit, and they may have 3 or 4 stops, and it will, the most that you would have to walk from your home is less than 1/4 of a mile to a destination where they would pick you up, and then they would take you on to that service. It would also connect you into our drop-off points in both Front Runner and in light rail tracks, and allow you to continue on. The cost for you would be, if you're a monthly pass holder, it would just be included in your pass. If you're new to the service, you would pay your $2.50 through credit card through this service. And so it's been used in other parts, and I have 2 maps here that I'll just quickly talk about. This probably goes through some of the discussions that I did. It also has operating hours from 6 to 9, which is currently where our flex routes are offering service. And then, and just to give you a sense, that's a map of Salt Lake County. So it's really about at least a fourth, if maybe a little bit more than a fourth of the county to try this pilot program for a year to see how this works. In the meantime, the flex routes that you see on your map will continue to operate within Harriman. So if you have residents that are using that service will continue. We want to make sure if we go down this route that we have it right. And I think what we'll learn from this is there a balance? Are there places where we would pick up more riders offering more frequent service down a particular corridor? And then as you look at some of the neighborhoods which probably aren't as conducive to, I always joke that if we had stayed with the Platte of Zion, it would be an ideal transit neighborhood. Those cross streets and the ability to get from one street to the other actually lends itself better to transit use. And so certainly we want to support you as a community in the right way, and so it'll be interesting to try this pilot. As we come out with it, we'll have a large communication process in there, and we would love for your support and helping to let your residents know about that option. Let me just talk briefly about this final discussion, and we're having it with our advisory council, and many of you may have participated in a large survey that we did with a national consultant, Jarrett Walker and Associates, about coverage versus frequency. Currently in our system, about 60% of our system is designed for frequency. And by frequency, something that's going every 15 to 30 minutes picks up a fair amount of ridership along that particular route, especially at peak times. And at peak times in those systems, you know, during the rush hour, those buses are practically full. Versus coverage, which says, for example, you as a taxpayer are paying into our system and you have a right to have some kind of coverage, but that coverage can't, and from a practical standpoint, may not meet the needs of your community. And is there a balance in that, and should that balance change more than that 60-40? Is there pieces to your community that as you're developing, you've focused, and as you do your housing plan or update your housing plan and you identify transit corridors, is that a place where we make a commitment to you as you're developing those corridors that will run frequent service, for example, down those corridors, and then look for other ways to provide coverage? And coverage could be a bus, but it could be this microtransit solution that you know, better serves, you know, those peak times when you want service, and the rest of the time you may not need it. Or maybe you're a senior and you need to get to the doctor appointment, and it certainly could provide that option for you as well. So we would love that feedback. There's two questions in that coverage feedback. One is, do you change that 60-40 for service that we're currently providing? And then the other part of it is we look to that 3/4 of that transit tax, transportation tax going to new service. Do you change that number? There are selfish reasons why you'd look at frequency. A lot of our federal reimbursements are based on ridership, so when we add ridership, it's advantageous. On the other hand, as you have a growing community, unless you have a transit piece to that, it makes it difficult for you as a community, and so we would certainly welcome that. Councilmember Smith, am I missing anything in that discussion that the advisory council had, or?
No, and that's something that from the advisory council, you know, we were asked to provide input at that time and back to the trustees. And one of the things that came out of the advisory group is that really we wanted an opportunity to bring those questions back to our individual cities and constituencies to ask and get some more of that feedback so that we were representing really the desire going forward. And so that's something, this is the paper that Carlton's referenced right here that we were given and asked really to fill out and give back. And this is what I'd like to take an opportunity and get a copy to each of you so that you can provide that feedback to myself and solicit some more of that to be able to take back to our next, we actually have been asked to return that a little bit before our next meeting. But again, it addresses those things of, you know, what the current service ratio is, and we're talking obviously about the central region, which is Salt Lake and Tuala counties. And then what do we think that, do we need to allocate those percentages differently moving forward? And again, as you look at some of the service areas, the map that we have here, you know, do we collectively out here say that in the future we want more dedicated to service availability out here, so expansion of service and less on ridership, or, you know, how do we want to say that factors in? And then there's also 3 other areas that they asked for us really to prioritize as a community and get back. So I appreciate Carlton taking the time to address that a little bit tonight, because he's gonna have a lot more knowledge to be able to say it a lot better than I can. But I'll get each of you a copy of that to be able to get that input back.
With that, I know you have a busy agenda, but if there are questions I can respond to, I'm happy to do that.
What's the time frame on the microchip?
The intent is to have it implement this fall. I would think it's probably, realistically, it's probably gonna be more in the October timeframe. Initially, it'll start out as 14 vans, but we have the ability to ramp it up if we need to. And you know, if you picture a van in maybe your neighborhood and it's picking up a half a dozen people, you know, that are fairly close to each other, and the app, similar to most of the ride-hailing apps, knows that you've made a request, and Jim and Susan down the street have all made a request and tell you to meet out at the end of the cul-de-sac on such and such a road, you know, in 15 minutes. Then you know, and you get picked up and you take. And to be honest, sometimes that's cheaper than us paying for a bus with, you know, 4 people on it and running it through a whole route. So we're, you know, looking at it, and you're better served. I mean, above all, you're better served. And
I have a question about the microtransit. I actually believe I spoke with Kent Millington. I believe he's the gentleman that was at the league meeting down in St. George.
he was there
Yeah,
with us.
and I guess I'll play the devil's advocate on the microtransit pilot program. To me, it mirrors rideshare, it mirrors Uber and all those kind of ride-sharing things, and to me, it takes away from the private market and pays for it with money that's extracted out of citizens. And it seems like we're subsidizing UTA, all with taxpayer money, to compete against private industry, and that's troubling to me. How do you see it?
Well, I thought about this a little bit, like, when would you use a ride-hailing service versus, because if this is $2.50 a person, you probably wouldn't put your family of 5 or 7 on in a ride, a microtransit, right? You'd probably call Lyft or Uber to take you there, because it'd be a cheaper option, but you would think that through. If you were yourself, if our goal is not to take you, also Uber and Lyft would probably pick you up in your home in Harriman, and let's say you worked in Murray, they would take you to Murray, right? Mm-hmm. We're not gonna take you to Murray. If you're getting in this system, we'll take you to anywhere in that geofence area, and that might even become smaller as time goes on, but we're doing this test pilot. But I will take you to the track stop or the front runner stop, and you're able to take your pass and continue on in the system.
Sure, I mean, I definitely see the intent behind it. For instance, I have a little gal that lives by me, and she doesn't drive.
Yeah.
And she lives in West Jordan, which is within your little boundary. I mean, not lives in West Jordan, but works there, right?
Yeah.
And so it costs her about, $30 a day to use Uber to go back and forth.
Yeah.
But, which is a lot, this would be way cheaper, but then it concerns me that, yeah, that's true, but we live in a capitalist society supposedly, and so why are we using taxpayer money to take care
We,
of the
we
problem?
wouldn't take her to West Jordan, cause our thing wouldn't go that far.
Well, say Draper,
She'd have to get on a bus at some
but she could
point.
go all the way to Draper if she worked in Draper, which is
Yeah.
even further than West Jordan,
Yeah.
really. So do you see what I'm saying? So that part is concerning to me, that we would be subsidizing that. Maybe we take the millions of dollars it's taken in taxpayer money and find a solution
Well,
different than that.
we actually are working on some partnerships with, the ride-hailing companies, Lyft in particular. The challenge, in their case is, they can't provide a ride with that dollar amount. And the subsidy is a lot more.
Sure.
The other piece of that is they won't, right now, they don't do the paratransit piece. And that's not an option for us. I mean,
Yeah,
morally, it's not an option, but legally, it's not an option for us. And that, for the most part, that's not a service they provide. I served on the Salt Lake City Council. One of the biggest challenges we had is somebody with a wheelchair comes in on a late night plane. We fought forever with the taxi industry. Nobody would pick them up
Yeah.
from the airport. Can you imagine coming to another town, you're wheelchair bound and you can't get to your hotel?
Sure.
We sort of take a few of those things for granted, but this offers stuff that they just haven't entered into, at least not in this market.
Thank you.
So,
I have two questions for you.
please.
And it's kind of along the lines of what I think you're trying to address with this 60-40 thing, but is it the chicken or the egg? Alright, so look at this map, and people ask me about the density out here and transit. I pretty much tell them there is no transit. There's no train, we have virtually no bus. And the one line is rush hour only. There's really limited where it goes. So for a completely bedroom community where literally everyone commutes, where we have even increasing density pressures, how do we get that service when ridership is so low, people can't rely on it?
Sure.
So how do you increase ridership without increasing service?
That's one of the reasons we're doing this pilot, because, you can ramp it up once you start increasing the ridership. And this mechanism is a lot better with those smaller numbers than a fixed route bus is. And then if you're picking up enough people in a given neighborhood, that's when you have a fixed route
So
bus.
that's kind of the intent of part of this pilot.
Yeah.
is hopefully show that.
Yeah.
So then the second part of my question is, well, it's just a guess, but my guess is that we probably won't see significant increase in this area just because of the geography, the lay of the land, and where people commute to. If that's the case, then it's difficult to justify increasing service with lower numbers. Part of our frustration planning wise is that we've consistently set aside corridor preservation for actual transit for train lines and keep seeing it get wiped off of different planning maps. So we feel like we're doing everything that we can to actually purchase that land, set it aside, say here it is, and we can't get any traction.
Sure.
And that to me is the one thing that if a train line is there, that will sustain consistent ridership that you can build off of.
Well, let me answer that in two ways. Again, as you identify your transit corridors and your zoning and other things, follow that corridor, I think it would behoove us to put some commitment there, and that may be a graduated kind of service, but would support those transit corridors. The second part that I would say is don't ever give up your transportation corridors. I think we're investigating autonomous vehicles and some other mechanisms. Heavy rail is a very expensive process, which is great if you have super high ridership. Most of our system that we built in 2015 actually would not qualify for federal dollars today. The federal government has changed those standards, and so, for example, the red line, the green line, and even part of the blue line would not have qualified for federal funds where it did.
It's the same answer I got regarding
10 years.
I-15 and I-250.
So
Federal money paid for that stuff, and now we're out here and
Yeah,
all that we.
So here's what I would say, that in those corridors, and we were just in Jackson Florida, and they are, for example, they had a monorail system, which has become so antiquated that only their guys know how to fix it anymore. But they're changing that system to an autonomous vehicle system that goes through there. The biggest cost of operations and even construction, well, the biggest cost for us long-term is operations. You know, you have to man it with an operator.
Well, so I've heard things thrown around and absolutely keep its corridors, but you can have the,
But if
the
you have
bus
the,
that just runs
if you
on
have the
that.
corridor, then you can have the discussion down the road. You'll never get the corridor back.
Carlton, I just like to make a comment, what Jared was talking about is, for years, we've had these corridors, and you're aware of those, because we keep saying the
Sure.
same thing. And we go to these transportation meetings, and we draw these planning sessions, and we draw it on there, and then we go to the meeting of the submitted plan, and they take it off, that's been our frustration.
It's not even a plan, like, we've done it, it's there and it's just waiting.
So it's not, if we could just get it on the map, is what we're saying, just, I don't care, put it like Gray said, it's a ghost, possibly with mass transit in the future, but at least it's on some people's radar in the future.
The answer I'm kind of hearing, not necessarily from you, but we've gotten kind of before, comes back around to, well, it's kind of politics, these different committees that decide what needs to go where.
There is a little bit of politics to it. I would also say it's driven by cost and ridership and constraint in the plan. So I think you could probably get to the ghost piece easier than the funded piece. But know that we're bound by the same plan. Like, the plan isn't our plan, the plan is a regional plan. And we can't actually build something that's not on that plan. We're constrained by that plan as well. So,
So how do we change that plan is a question.
it gets modified periodically. Usually it's brought if there's money that comes with it, you know, that you've got some new money that moves that up the cycle. Some, it also, or it gets programmed into the existing monies and it's, you know, basically the next project in line. We participate along with every other jurisdiction in that plan. It was just adopted in May, but it gets updated every 4 years, and they do make amendments before. So yeah, I think if there was a viable funding stream or something that lend itself, you know, things, you know, have gotten moved up all the time when something came with some additional funding. So
And that's part of that. I don't remember if you were there on Monday for our announcement of the Southwest Visioning Study.
I wasn't able to be there.
Infrastructure, that was one of the major things that I think Mayor Timothy and I pointed out was that one of our major goals of that is to help us identify funding sources to change kind of the order in which some of these projects get done. So
I mean,
hopefully we'll have some good discussions.
in my, you know, I served on my city council for 16 years, and we had a number of projects. I would guess in the scope of my tenure, the city probably put in, just magnitude of scale, about $200 million into transit projects. I wouldn't expect Harriman City to.
Yeah, our budget's just a little.
Yeah, no, but I'm just saying, that's how expensive it is. And you know, to go forward with any of those things. And that wasn't even UTA's cost or anybody else's cost. I mean, we had to end up, that's why I say on your corridor, a lot of our costs are just moving our own infrastructure.
Right.
You can't have sewer, for example, underneath lines that are electrified. You get cathodic issues, and so you have to move water and sewer lines. So to the degree that you can sort of preserve those corridors and keep your, you know, utilities out of them, just will help you down the road. And you're smart. You're really smart to preserve those. We lucked out in many of our cases. Brigham Young put in wide streets in Salt Lake City, and then the other part, the railroad abandoned right-of-ways. That's how most of that got built.
Thank you.
Sure. I think I probably used my time, but
Thank you, Carlton, we appreciate you coming out.
thanks for your time.
You know, it's one of those things that, serving on the advisory committee, you don't, the old saying, you know, you don't know what you don't know. So you sit on the committee or board or whatever it is, and then you figure out how much you really don't know. And it's been quite as you can tell just by the little bit of time we've had here today and all the things that Carlton covered for us, it's vast and there's a lot of moving parts to it. And I guess the new structure moving forward, we're still, figuring out how all that works together, but I definitely think we've got the vision of where we wanna take this in the future and we're headed in the right direction.
Consider me your point of contact, and I hear you, and let us work over the next few years to see if we can improve some things, so.
Absolutely.
Thank
All right,
you.
thanks Carlton.
Alright, we'll go ahead and move on to item 3.3, budget amendment overview.
Okay.
Director Allen Wright.
I was asked again to review what was proposed for the budget amendment for public hearing tonight. First of all, we have a number of projects that were budgeted in the last fiscal year that didn't get completed. We need to move the remaining amount into this budget year, so they'll continue. The big one, as you remember, is we're anticipating hopefully this year to sell the Autumn Mall property and repay the water rights impact fund. But the rest of these are projects that were underway, partially completed during the previous fiscal year. This is the amount to complete them during this year. So we're just moving the budget over from last year to this year. It won't affect our fund balances because we've already calculated these into the budgeted amounts from last year. Next of all, we're expecting $2.7 million from UDOT, and we're selling the Dennis property down on 5600 North. We're expecting the sale of the Aaron Osmond property for $1.7 million. We are budgeting to receive that money and then to expend it for $4 million to pay off the balance of the Autumn Mall property. This transaction will result in capital projects increasing in fund balance by $850,000. The next one, and this we talked to you about a couple weeks ago. This was not on the one I showed you 2 weeks ago, but we were instructed as this was presented that the Estes property is available for $750,000. We still have $120,000 that we can get from the grant we got from the state legislature. That would mean that we would use $630,000 of our park impact fees to purchase the balance of the property. This will be a reduction of fund balance of $630,000. We currently have $5,645,000 in our fund balance park impact fees. This is a summary of the animal services I showed you last year, our last meeting. We're projecting revenue of $167,500. The bulk of this will be funded by general fund. This will require a general fund transfer of $328,900, and we're projecting expenditures of $496,400. So, as I mentioned, we're using $328,900 of general fund. This will replace the $330,000 that was budgeted to go to the county animal services. So we'll budget to spend these. The net effect is $328,900 coming from general fund, and then we will reduce the budget for the Salt Lake Animal Services by $330,000. So we're not increasing our cost at all here. By taking this on, we are licensing animals now, we're impounding animals, we're adopting animals, so there's additional revenue that comes with the additional. But we do have about $45,000 of this cost that is one-time money here, so we'll see a significant decrease next year. Okay, the next is the, and both on the animal services and the stormwater here, I have the detail behind it if you want to go through the detail, but we have our new stormwater fee. We're projecting $1,450,000 in revenue. The budget is for $312,000 of administrative costs, $5,600 $540,000 of maintenance costs, and $371,000 of engineering costs, which gives us a total expenditures of $1,224,000. The difference between those two numbers, though, is a projected reserve fund that needs to be built up in this fund, and so it will generally, we will be budgeting for about a $200,000 surplus here to build this refund, this reserve fund that is required by this. So that's what I have. Any questions?
Nope.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, appreciate it. 3.4 Olympia Hills update, Gordon.
All right, we thought we'd bring this to you to have a discussion with the council. I wanted to just reiterate what you guys already know. The Olympia Hills project has been submitted to the county. This is the zoning they're looking forward. They're proposing to develop through the county. It has a slight change. Big change. They've gone from almost 900 units to 600, which is still fairly significant.
9,000.
9,000 to 6,000. Yeah, 600 guys. This has turned out really good.
Great.
With that, they submitted a traffic report that hundreds of pages, with some things. This is kind of what the map looks like. And again, I'm sure the public's seen this as well as you've had this in your packet. And then again, just showing how the units would be distributed through that. So the reason we're bringing this to you tonight is we're right now in the throes of our general master plan. And it's been our practice historically to include areas of our annexation document in our general plan and plan for those areas. That's important because the sewer district and others use these things to determine capacity in their facilities and to work with property owners on these things. So we wanted to just give the council some opportunity to discuss it and kind of direct us as we go forward with this. So that's the end of my presentation. Turning it over to the council to do all the rest of the talking.
Well, obviously, we're all aware of the proposed development out there and the process that it's currently going through. And, that, for my respects, that is what it is. It's a process that's taking place in the county and something that we should continue just to be abreast of. I think, to your point, our concern with this, or how do we deal with this area out here, to include, obviously, where Olympia Hills is proposed to be developed, but all of the surrounding land around that, which is a lot more acreage, primarily owned. There's some private ownership, but primarily owned by Rio Tinto out in the area. In our previous general plans, and for quite some time now, we've had that as part of our annexation declaration. And from my perspective, I don't think that just the fact that we have the application that's before the county right now, that changes at least our view as a city of that area that's out there, because again, it encompasses much more than just that proposed development out there. So in regards to the process that we're in, where it deals with updating our general plan, I think this is a great opportunity for us to really study that area, to really get into all of the different components and plans that go hand in hand with the general plan, and to go through a very robust planning process ourselves of what is the capacity out there of all infrastructure, and what infrastructure is needed out there to be able to support development and growth. Again, it's been part of our annexation declaration for a long time. We all have anticipated for a long time that area was going to be developed. And now we see the first and early stages of that beginning to potentially take place. And from my perspective, I don't think that should change what we have envisioned as a city for many, many years to happen out there, and that would potentially be part of Harriman City. Again, I think we should keep it as part of our annexation declaration, and I think we take the opportunity as we go through this general plan process to study those issues as they relate to our all aspects of development, all the utilities, all the transportation infrastructure, everything that goes in that we know that it takes to develop anywhere within our city, you know, on a daily basis. And we look at all of those thoroughly and completely, and we know what again the capacity is, what is needed in order to help support development out there. I'm going to say that obviously I'm biased. I think that we still have the best opportunity as a city to do the best planning and development of that area out there for the long-term good of not only Harriman City, but for the southwest area of the county. This is a huge piece of land, as we've all come to realize over the last over a year now, you know, as some of these talks have been taking place, that this is an important piece to the puzzle in terms of development within Salt Lake County and some of the needs that exist in Salt Lake County. And again, the only way that we're going to ensure that area is developed the best way possible to support the needs of the county, but also to not impact, to have the right infrastructure to support the development, I'll put it that way. So from my perspective, I think that we keep moving down the path that we have for many years, and use this opportunity as we go through the general plan updating process to still say we believe that this area fits within Harriman City, and that again it needs to go through the proper planning process, the proper study process. I think it ties hand in hand with the visioning process that's been kicked off by the Southwest Mayor's Group, and what they're doing there. I think all of these can tie hand in hand together to say, at the end of the day, we have all the documentation in place to say what this development out here should look like. And I don't think that, even though there may be plans that we don't think completely addresses all those needs right now, I don't think that should be the opportunity, or should be a reason for us to turn away from what our vision has been all along for that area.
So I would echo a lot of what Clint said. I say this a lot, and it's that they're not making any more land. We can make houses, we can make cars, we can make a lot of different things, but we're not making any more land. And so it is our responsibility to get it right. That's our job as elected officials. Our job is not to be knee-jerk and go, oh, we gotta hurry and do this because this particular person or that particular person wants to do this now, we gotta get this thing done. Whether it be this body here in this room, or be at the county, the same type of body at the county, no matter where it is, people that are deciding how to use this limited resource that we have called land, our job is to do it right. And so I believe that that's why we had the study. We paid $30,000 for a study not very long ago. They came back and helped us understand some of the capabilities and the holding capacity of that land, because it's not part of Harriman, but it is part of our annexation declaration. We had anticipated it coming into Harriman. And so it's our responsibility to plan for that. And I think that that's what we've done through ordering a study, or hiring somebody to do that study. And I think it would be irresponsible of us to go against a study that we paid for without some really clear plans of why we would do differently than that. I believe, again, after that study was done, we were asked by other adjoining cities to participate in even a broader study, which we elected to do, again, to spend money, our taxpayers' money, not the city's money, taxpayers' money, to do that study. And I think that we owe it to our taxpayers who are funding for those types of studies to do it right. And I think that part of doing it right is to wait and see what those studies mean. There's nothing more frustrating in our day and age. We want things this fast, and sometimes the snap is not fast enough. You know, I remember dial-up internet. I know that's old, but it's brutal compared to now. And back then it was like, oh, this is awesome. But we're in this generation, or this society, that wants things yesterday. And if we make land use decisions based on yesterday's demands, we're gonna do a disservice to our community. And that's not a position I wanna be in. I think we need to look at it thoroughly, we need to understand it thoroughly. And as a governing body, we have to make the decision. It has to lie with us, regardless of all the external pressures that come on us. We have to do it right. That's my feeling on Olympia Hills.
You don't have feelings. If I understand your question correctly, we're in the middle of our general plan, which was started, the revision started what, 12, 18 months ago?
About 6, 7 months, we're supposed to finish up about January,
It feels like it's been a constant.
We've been in it forever, but yeah.
But we're in the middle of that, and this is just like other cities. South Jordan next to us has it in their annexation area. West Jordan has all that Rio Tinto in their annexation area, and part of that general plan is to signal to utility providers, etc., what our intention would be so that they can adequately plan. So, if I understand your question right, you're saying we need to finish our general plan. How do you want us to look at Olympia Hills because they've put an application in the county? Yes?
Yeah.
So if that's the question, I think the answer's pretty simple. It's still in our annexation declaration area. We need to continue to plan properly until there's a definitive decision made of what's going to happen with it. I think it faces significant obstacles to pass through the county. Not just political, but infrastructure plan, the things that we've just mentioned. We've done a study, the Southwest just kicked off the study, which the county has paid nearly half of that cost for, to focus on infrastructure needs, not only of new potential land, but more importantly, fix the problems that we have with current infrastructure, our current plan. So I think we have to include it and continue to plan as if it were going to be here. I agree, it makes the most sense for it to be in Harriman. We would like it to be in Harriman, and we would be the most affected by it. I think we're in the best position to do it the right way. The farthest head and all that, but we don't get to make that decision because the landowner does. But I think there's significant hurdles, enormous opposition from residents, organized groups that are ready to change the minds of people. I think we have to use the data that we have in our study and use that in our general plan. And as other data comes along from the Southwest Visioning study, from other things, we can revise that in the future as those things come up. But I think we have to continue with our plan and use that data and show not only them, but Rio Tinto and other landowners, this would be our plan and how we would go about doing it. The system that we have, the effect on infrastructure, we've done all of that, why would we not?
Okay. Do you have the direction you need?
I think so. I think we're ready to move forward, so.
No reason for me to say the things that have already been said.
Okay.
Just one more comment if I could add, and that is, we've talked about the landowners out there, Rio Tinto being one of them, and we have a long history of a very good partnership and relationship with Rio Tinto. And we've been talking about a lot of this potential development, how that looks for years. And I think that there's been an enormous amount of effort that has been invested in that over the years. And I think it would be, unfortunate and a shame for us to, for any reason at this point, because there is no reason to turn away from that work that's been done in the past.
Right.
Today, there is no reason to not continue down the course
Well, in that vein,
that we have. And I wanna say to those people that we've been partners with and that we've done this work with, that we're still in the game. We're still interested in having those discussions.
In that vein, we definitely owe it to Rio Tinto in particular to show them the plan.
Absolutely.
How we would handle it and how we would welcome them in and the shared goals that we have together.
Yep.
To me, Olympia shouldn't really matter to that.
I agree.
Of anyone, I think that they're the main people we should be working with to show them that plan and how we can help them achieve what they need to.
But
The common goals that
Let's
we
face
have.
it, they have a significant amount of land out there. They have a significant interest in how that develops out and how that affects the potential, longevity of their mining operation here. There's a lot of factors,
So
obviously.
which we support, and I think we share a
And
lot
we
of common
absolutely
goals.
support that. Yep. So I just want to say that because again, this isn't just this isn't just a discussion that we're having right now. This is a discussion that has been had for a long time with some very good partners, with, again, a lot of common goals and visions. And today, I have no reason to say that we have any reason to stray from the path that we've been heading down for a long time.
Thank you, I feel real comfortable with where you're at, and I think, ready to go.
But if I may add one more thing as far as a plan, I think that's the thing that is so conspicuously missing from their application. There's so many questions that are unanswered. Just reducing units doesn't address infrastructure. And saying that we won't build the next street in our project until this many houses are built doesn't address the effect all that has on the downstream infrastructure. And so that no one's confused, that's really what our general plan will help do. If that's in our area, this is how we would address the infrastructure and the density or units that would support. And just looking at what's been submitted, I mean, 6,000 is still insanely above the information we have as far as our study, et cetera. So I think if anything, it's on us to take that data and map it out and show, no, this is what a real plan looks like.
Well, and that's the beauty of the general plan, is it doesn't single out these areas, it's the whole thing.
This is how they all work together.
It's how they all work together, and again, that's what our interest has been and continues to be.
And I think that's where we become a good partner even with Rio Tinto, is trying hard to use our resources here also to really help move that plan along, help them see some visioning behind, hey, this is what it could look like, here's, we would love to help with this type of thing, we wanna make this a real asset to the community, thus benefiting them also, it's mutually beneficial for them.
Well, and we've all been doing meetings and I tons of phone calls, and I'm sure I'll get more if I don't express this properly, but the conversations I've had with organized resident groups, et cetera, is, yeah, that's really all we wanna see, is that the infrastructure can support whatever it is gonna go there.
Yep.
So, somebody's gotta put that plan together, and we've been working on it, let's absolutely finish it.
We'll have Mike put that plan together.
Alright, any other discussion? Okay, we will move on to item 3.5, Game Point Development Agreement discussion. Gordon?
Yeah, I just gonna start off by saying stuff because John's PowerPoint, I always accuse him of it being boring. And this time it's really exciting. I made a little floor there, usually you start white. But no, this is an exciting project for us, and so, pardon?
John did it.
John did this himself, holy cow. I didn't know attorneys could do that. They can. So he's gonna just present the meat of the development agreement. So we're all ready for this exciting moment with the fancy PowerPoint, John. I'm turning over to you.
All right, so you've seen this basically from 30,000 feet. This is now down into the weeds. As kind of a little background, I have given to the Planning Commission a copy of the development agreement and asked for their input. Have not received anything yet. I don't plan to see anything. But. So, as you remember, this is the property we're talking about. 2 lots that have been divided into parcel 1 and parcel 2. You know the location. Now let's go into the weeds, basically. What's in the development agreement? What's in the nuts and bolts? So the project shall be developed and constructed substantially as set forth in a site plan, which is an attachment, and specific design conditions and criteria, which is also an exhibit. Now, the Planning Commission has been tasked to give you a recommendation of a site plan and design criteria, basically design guidelines. So they are working on that. Now, in response to one of the issues raised by the mayor about putting something in parking in the development agreement, I think it belongs in one of these exhibits, either in the site plan or in the design criteria. And there's vesting. Vesting, it's a window vesting. So the developer is vested that he can build it within this window. And if he doesn't do it before or after, he loses his vesting. That was something that the mayor raised about a termination of the vesting. So it's not vesting for 20 or 30 years like our other development agreements. So this is a window vesting.
So it's a 4-year window, basically, it has to have a CO within 4 years.
At the absolute latest.
Yeah. That's right.
But if they pull the building permit tomorrow, they'd only have 2 years.
So it's a sliding window, how's that? And the triggering point is they have to get a building permit within 2 years. And building permit's gonna be expensive, when we figure at that point, they're really building, they'll really build. They're not gonna spend money and not really build. Am I right?
Absolutely.
So, on or before December 31, this is one of the commitments the city has made. 2019, the city will construct the Main Street extension from its terminus, currently on Harriman Boulevard, all the way to the future location of Miller Crossing Drive, as shown on the plat. We can go back and look at that if you want. We're working on it right now. That's what the tractors are out there. And that's why I think they're gonna close the road or dig into our road. Is that right, Gordon? Are they digging right now? Okay. So they're doing that.
Drive home that way.
That's our commitment. We're working on it. A commitment that the developer has made is on or before March 15th, 2020, they'll pay the city $100,000, which is, I've called it the Miller Crossing Drive Property Acquisition Cost. That's basically half the cost of the road. Then the city, the city and the developer has no obligation to build Miller Crossing, but they can if they want. And then we have a reimbursement mechanism to the developer here, and he's gonna get reimbursed from 2 buckets or 2 sources. One, impact fees, and the other from a participation agreement. We'll talk about that in a minute. So this thing starts to grow legs and gets pretty complicated pretty fast. So the reimbursement agreement is Miller Crossing fee will be repaid from transportation funds collected from their development, from the restaurant and from the Family Fun Center, that area that you saw in the plat. Okay? The participation agreement. Now this is our agency, our redevelopment agency. So they are gonna receive, so this is a little complicated. So the sales tax has 2 components, point of sale and population. So the point of sale, 70% of that's gonna go from the city to the agency. And then 50% of what the agency gets is gonna go to the developer until they get an aggregate of $100,000 from the impact fee and from the sales tax. So it's basically an incentive. Do more sales, get more money, faster, hallelujah.
Yeah, and the sooner they start collecting out, the sooner they start to get it back. An incentive to.
That's one of the clever parts of this incentive.
And they'll
Very
take
clever.
50% of 70%.
50% of 70.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and the impact fee too, because that's triggered on building permits, so. You get your money back as soon as you can get moving. All right, so this is the developer and street amenities. So the concern, or not the concern, but they're gonna do street amenities for Auto Mall Drive, Miller Crossing Drive, and Main Street. So that's 3 sides of their property. And after the warranty period, the city's gonna maintain or cause it to be maintained. And this is kind of a listing of what those amenities are. Basically, landscaping, irrigation, park strips, streetlights, landscape, irrigation, and then a 15-foot park strip behind the sidewalk on Main Street.
So as I'm reading this, and just the verbiage to me appears that it's not curb, gutter, landscape, and irrigation. So
It is.
it's just not curb.
Cause it just says means sidewalks, but not curb and gutter, landscape, so it shows the amenities, it's only sidewalks.
So they'll have to install sidewalk, but they won't have to install curb and gutter, but they will have to do the landscape and irrigation.
Okay, can we rephrase
Yeah,
that a
that,
little
it,
bit? Just
cause
that
to
way
me,
in the
to me, it looks like they only have to do
I
sidewalks,
tried to
everything else
shorten the
is but.
language
Okay,
and.
grammar, we know matters in these situations, so.
Yeah. Good catch, I'll make sure you'll get your own copy of the development agreement and a bunch of other agreements. You either get them hard copy today or electronic, your choice.
Hard copies.
Okay, in the development agreement, the developer may only develop and construct a food establishment on lot 1. And for purposes of this development agreement, we define a food establishment as a a facility that stores, prepares, packages, serves, or otherwise provides food for human consumption, where consumption is on or off premises.
So this language here is meant to only constrain what can go on lot one, but it has no bearing on lot two, correct?
This doesn't, but we deal with lot two in
Okay,
just a second.
thank you.
This clause does apply to the vesting siding window, correct?
Yes,
Everything applies to the vesting siding.
everything applies to the vesting. And then we also have another fail-safe later on. This is the second. Developer may only develop and construct an entertainment center on lot two. And then we define what an entertainment center is, and this is at least a 40,000 square foot indoor amusement facility that offers a broad selection of attractions, including but not limited to miniature golf, outdoor ropes, course, bowling, laser tag, escape room, virtual sports bays, redemption arcade games, marketing. If you want to add anything else in there, tell me what it is and I'll put it in there.
Do we need to have those called out here because of how the previous one dealt with lot one, that this can have food in it as well?
This can have food in it, yes.
Do we need to call that out specifically? I mean, again, it's family entertainment, and we've outlined a lot of those, but again, because of the language that's in one that says lot one can only have food, I just wanna make sure that, again, it's clear that even though lot one can only have food on it, that
Lot two still can.
lot two still can, and that's again, what I
Great
understand
idea.
to be
Great
a good component of the overall design.
I just wrote it in indelible pencil.
Okay?
Okay, so the term of the agreement shall be for 2 years, basically. And then it's kind of this fail-safe, if it's not recorded within 30 days of expected date, he agrees to go back to the AutoZone, which is kind of a fail-safe, you know. If we're really gonna do this, let's really record it, let's really move forward. So this is the protection, basically the Twila city problem. There's no monetary damages. Their only remedy is specific performance. So we won't find ourselves with $1 million bill if we breach. We'll find ourselves then saying to the court, you have to do this, which is not a problem. Then as a fail-safe, the city has an option, and this is a separate agreement. It's not part of the development agreement, so it'll be a separate agreement you get, that the city can repurchase the lots if Game Point fails to obtain a building permit to construct, or develop or construct a family entertainment center as approved by the city on lot two within 2 years from the date that Osmond purchased the property for the original purchase price.
You have a matching one for lot one?
What's that?
Do you have a matching clause for lot one?
That says lots.
So
We can
you
purchase
get the whole
both
thing,
lots.
Get the whole thing.
But the family entertainment center is the trigger point. If he takes,
Got ya.
okay,
So the lot one could take a little bit longer.
Right, but the trigger is lot two, that's why it's.
right. But we get both lots
Lots.
back, and it's for the original purchase.
We don't want that.
No, we want him to succeed. Now you remember, in our ordinance, it says that there's a building standard or a design standard. It says that we require all commercial buildings to have 60% brick or stone, but then we have an exception for buildings that are over 40,000 square feet. But the city council has to grant it. So it's like, he's gonna come in and ask the city council for an exception to that rule.
But what you're gonna see is he's gonna go through the planning commission, they're gonna review it, then they're gonna make a recommendation. So you will see that as a recommendation from the planning commission as opposed to him coming directly to you on the details. So the
Right,
real
they've
work's
been-
gonna
they've
take
been
place.
tasked, yeah.
It's
They've been
gonna go
tasked to
through
do
the
the
planning
site plan.
commission and then you of course have the final blessing of it. That's when it's an attachment.
This is the current look, at least the one that I saw. It doesn't have 60% stone or brick on it, as you can see. And it may change by the time the planning commission gets through with doing whatever they do to it. This is the site plan, I wish it were a little bit bigger.
It looks like the exact same presentation
It is.
inside the presentation.
What floor
First
underneath
inception.
it?
Yeah. Let's hope that.
Any questions?
I have one. Will you go back to the buyback of the property provision? So, the only concern that I have would be that if we ended the second 2-year window, so from the, building permits, and the owner of the land had built and improved the land in some way, how does it address the cost of that improvement with our ability to purchase the land?
We purchase it for the price we've agreed to. We get the benefit.
Can we just make sure that we clarify that in the,
It's pretty darn clear.
Okay.
This is the purchase price,
If-
this is
if
the
you're saying-
auction price.
if that's what you're saying, so and that, but that would include any improvements made by the owner during that time?
That's how that works.
Okay, I just wanna make sure that we're very clear on that now.
So what I wanted to just
See if
make
I
sure
can
you knew,
find
tonight, we didn't think there'd be a lot of comments on the development agreements because you're handing them for the first time. What we wanted you to do is look them over for the next 2 weeks. Next city council meeting, in the regular meeting, you're going to get a watered down presentation of what you just had. And at that time, we'd like your comments. And so you're not even gonna vote on them next week. You're voting on this a month from now. So what we wanna do is, tonight, you really don't need to scrutinize these too much. When you go home tonight, you
We
want
always
it.
scrutinize.
But tonight, we don't expect you to have read it. So he's gonna hand you hard copies of these different development agreements and then think about them later.
That was my only question.
So what you'll get here is like 4 documents, one is a development agreement, one is a reimbursement agreement for the impact fee, the other is that repurchase option, and the last one's gonna be the participation agreement between the agency and the developer.
Okay.
And it's just delightful reading.
Looking forward to it.
John, you gonna hand that out now?
Yeah, if you want me to.
Yeah, I'd like, that'd be great.
Appreciate it.
This is like Christmas, John.
I didn't hear any yells from the wall back there, so I guess
Everything
you're
looking
in
good over
agreement
there?
with,
The yelling took
They-
place earlier, we've been on.
Yeah, they beat me already, and so I'm kind of in submission.
Okay, perfect.
We
Yeah,
got one
he's
comment
actually
from-
been very good to work with.
That's good to hear.
With great, actually, great partnership.
Just a note,
Yeah,
this item was on planning commission, and we did receive a fair amount of feedback from planning commission at their last meeting. And so as we did look at those elevations and site plan, there's been a lot of work that's done
Already been done.
to address those. It's going back to planning commission on their first meeting, next month.
How dare you keep working on it,
Excellent.
and try to improve it.
Gotta make those planning commissioners earn that high K somehow.
And how long have they had this agreement, the planning commission?
Only 2 weeks. Or last week, that's what we handed out last week.
It's been 2 weeks, hasn't it?
2 weeks. 2 weeks. They have plenty of time, they're not gonna, we're gonna meet again before you vote on this on the 5th. And so they'll have had a full month with these documents.
So if you want a Word version, just tip me with an email or tell somebody, and
This is
that way you
great.
can word search if you
Right
want.
all over it.
Any further discussion or questions by the council on this one?
You can email John directly if you have some thought or question.
Yeah, the more eyes that look at this, the better.
Okay. All right, we will move on to item 3.6, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Discussion relating to the text change to the land development code to replace Salt Lake County with Harriman City in regards to animal services. Michael Lloyd.
Okay, and this is a recommendation from the planning commission, to just clean up our code, to reflect the changes that we've recently made. Very straightforward, again, we're just removing references to Salt Lake County, regarding animal services and replacing it with Harriman City. I believe in your packets you received some samples of what that language looks like. It doesn't do anything else other than just clarify that.
Any questions? All right, we'll move on then. Item 3.7, discussion and consideration of a text change to land development code to change buffering in a technology manufacturing TM zone. Once again, Michael.
As the Bullfrog project is underway, it's attracting more attention from some of the neighboring property owners. And there's been some concern that our current TM zone does not provide adequate buffering when we make a transition from that TM zone to a residential zone adjacent to that zoning district. There was a request that we increase our buffering standards for the TM zone. This is language that is currently in other parts of our code that we apply to, like our C2 zones and things like that. It would be around the perimeter of the property. The challenge that we have is, at our last joint meeting, we received a presentation from Jordan Valley about the water concerns. So we feel like this is kind of working almost in conflict, yeah, a little bit. So
Well, it depends on
this
what
is
the
consistent
buffer-
with our current coding, but we're thinking we may need to overhaul some of our standards. This could be an interim measure. I don't know what our timeline is as far as how quickly we're gonna develop out some of the other parcels around the Bullfrog
It's not
site.
gonna matter to Bullfrog, cause it's not.
Yeah, it's not gonna impact Bullfrog.
And so how are we like, do we have something imminent that this is gonna affect?
That I don't know.
So we are talking
Is
to
there
people.
someone requesting this to be changed?
It's the residents.
So what's requested is Jordan Valley Water District.
They're requesting this?
No, this is the text to try and address concerns from SLR. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
They're the ones who are concerned about what does that transition look like between the TM
So
zone
SLR,
and
so let me back up. There was an easement, we needed to extend gas and power up to Bullfrog. We needed SLR's easements. They expressed a great deal of concern about how this looks, so they came, met with us, and Bullfrog and said, add these improvements, this to your language so that you're buffering against our property. Bullfrog agreed, we agreed, everybody agreed, so this is the language for that.
So this is something that Bullfrog's already been made aware of.
Yeah,
and
we've
comfortable with.
gone through with them, and this meets all the details.
They don't have to, but they're willing to change the
Everybody's happy at
buffering.
this point.
Well,
But we are not happy with Jordan
So
Valley
to your point, this probably really is just a temporary measure to address some of the immediate concerns that we have in terms of easements and those types of things. But it really does require a deeper dive into how do we provide the proper buffering around the TM zone with, you know, incompatible uses or different uses next door without significantly impacting the other side of the coin, which we heard from Jordan Valley Water.
right, we need to do a more holistic look at our landscape regulation.
This agreement came in before we had the knowledge of Jordan Valley, so we're gonna agree to this, and then we're gonna come back, cause we have other people looking to come in with, and we want to have not just Jordan Valley's ordinances to enforce, but we wanna copy them into ours for the new annexed area. So,
So I understand that, but why would we change the whole land development code? Why don't we just do an agreement between these people who've already agreed and then take the deep dive and do it right? Rather than changing it now and changing it then. What, if everyone already agrees, why don't we just have a document that says everyone agrees and they're gonna do it that way?
well, so Bullfrog's agreed, there's other parcels that are going to be next to theirs that haven't been purchased yet, they're still Kennecott or Rio Tinto. And so they were asking for the full line for all the area, and so.
So what exactly is the change? Usually we'll see a red line, this is what it was, this is
So-
what we're proposing.
This is an interim measure, and I appreciate that that's frustrating. But we just don't have the bandwidth to do a deeper dive on our landscaping code to try and address some of those concerns. We also have an ongoing dialogue with Jordan Valley. We wanna better understand what their standards are, how do we
What are their
not only
recommendations?
apply them, but how do we work together on making sure that development is meeting their needs as well as ours?
So
I think we're
Jared's
still-
question, what are the significant changes or insignificant changes
Yeah.
to what's currently there to what's being proposed?
Yeah, and as you can see, all the underlying language is new to this section of the code.
Compared to
This
what?
is largely language
So
that we're
this
using
didn't
in other
exist,
places
so what
already.
happened is, this part of the code, and I'm gonna make one statement that may not be true, but the rest of it's totally true. So everything that's underlined wasn't part of this code. What I understood we did is we had this language elsewhere in the code,
Yeah.
we picked it up and just inserted
Yeah.
word for word what's already elsewhere in the code.
That's, I'm not reading it, I'm not seeing anything.
But
new.
this
What
doesn't,
are they currently required to do that's different from this?
There was no requirement.
there was none of this was
There's
here.
no
It was,
buffering period, they
well,
were
it
not
was all
gonna do
based upon the
buffering?
site plan, so we went in there and the planning commission has the regulation, they regulated it. And what happened is, they didn't really have to make much changes, cause they did what was expected, and it met this code, but then SLR said, well, you don't have this codified, even though Bullfrog was willing to do it, they were agreeing, well, you never put this in your code.
You
Put
just
this
said
in-
it somewhere else in the
But
code.
it's not in the TM zone,
It's in
so
a
now we
different zone.
lifted it out of the rest of the code, inserted in the TM.
So it's consistent with what we're doing in
We already
other
did this
areas
in
of the
the
code.
C2 zone, other zones, but we didn't,
We didn't have it since this
and
is.
so we agreed to lift it out of the rest of the code, put it in here, so it's not innocuous. If this is pretty benign, it's this. Then what happened is, we got some in discussions with Jordan Valley. Now, Jordan Valley is telling us that maybe we're
Well, I think
doing
that's
some things.
totally separate, right?
Yeah, so
I
it's
mean,
two
our
separate.
conversation there was, okay, well, give us some recommendations on how we can codify this for new building, et cetera. That's like a, in the future.
That's what we're
Yeah.
bringing to you in the future, and I got confused when I
Yeah.
stepped out. But so this is just for the SLR to have the extra buffering. We agreed to that, we're adding this to, so it's now codified. And now, if somebody else comes in, this is set in stone, it's not just the planning commission requiring it. And now, in the future, we're gonna bring you some changes based upon Jordan Valley.
I just can't resist this one. I went to the Bear River Council thing this last weekend, and they say nobody's ever running out of water. And then Jordan Valley, twice in, well, 3 times now in a month, says if Limpy Hills is built, we're running out of water in 10 years. So, got a little more work to
Who
do on
knows?
on water.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I understand what
But I
you're saying
digress.
Alright,
So any
Thank
further
you.
questions for,
so you're just getting this in work, and we'll bring this back to you in 2 weeks.
okay, we'll move on to item 3.8.
I think we should
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
adjourn in time for.
Thank you for bringing that to our
now.
attention.
Can you,
Or-
get through that in 6 minutes?
We'll still have all the city manager updates, so we'll stop and then
There
regardless.
is a few that I guess.
So,
Yeah, we still got more.
I will agree with you, so with that, I would accept a motion to continue, or to, temporarily adjourn our.
Motion to temporarily recess our work meeting to go to our regular general meeting.
All in favor?
Second.
Aye.
I will not survive. We knew it was gonna be a long night.